Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of the Roundabout Way of Fate. This will be part 33, the second half to chapter 21. During one class in the middle of June, All Might pulls Izuku aside once he's gotten changed into his healer costume. "You're going to be doing something a little different than the rest of your classmates," All Might says. Izuku winces. "Let me guess, they're doing more combat training." All Might's smile turns into something more mischievous and secretive. "Something like that." Izuku starts to get nervous. All Might has him stay by his side until everyone has gathered around him. Kacchan arches an eyebrow at Izuku, who just shrugs cluelessly. He jumps in surprise when All Might plops a large hand on his shoulder and grins. "You may be wondering why we've come here today." All Might's voice booms as he gestures to the buildings of Ground Beta. "Well, today's training will entail a bit of role play." Izuku is bewildered as to why he sounds so excited. Unsurprisingly, Kaminari, ever the immature one, snickers at this. All Might continues, oblivious. "You all, of course, will be the heroes. I, however, will be your villain. And young Midoriya." Izuku lets out a surprise squeal as two muscled arms suddenly wrap around his torso and lift him up. "All Might!" "Will be my hostage," All Might declares. The students tense up, bracing themselves for a fight. All Might's eyes flash. "You have 40 minutes to rescue him." The hero squats down before leaping into the air. Izuku shrieks and clutches his arms for dear life, but All Might holds him to his chest securely. They land on top of a building with a heavy thump. "I'm bait?" Izuku exclaims. "No, you're a hostage," All Might says patiently. "And I'm a villain. This is a great training exercise for these young heroes. Plus," he shifts his grip, "this is exciting. I never get to be the villain." Izuku can't see the man's face, but he can practically hear the eager grin in his voice. Seriously? Why does he have to be the hostage? Well, he does suppose he wouldn't have much of a part to play in rescue training, as a healer. With a huffy little sigh, he begrudgingly lets himself go limp. So much for his own training. Mere seconds after they land on the roof, the sounds of explosions erupt from the city below. Kacchan rockets over to them, a snarl on his face. "Give him back, you fucker!" All Might shifts Izuku over to one arm and flicks his fingers with his free hand, creating a blast of air that knocks Kacchan backwards. A moment later, Todoroki appears, having bolstered himself up with an iceberg. He makes to attack, but All Might grabs Izuku's head in a massive hand. Ah, All Might warns. "I'm a villain now, remember? I can hurt my hostage at any moment." Todoroki freezes. Izuku does too, even though they both know All Might won't actually hurt him. But this is way too similar to his situation with Stain. Izuku can see it in Todoroki's eyes. They look the same as they did back then, angry and frustrated, but ultimately fearful. He stands down. Kacchan recovers from the attack and blasts his way onto the roof. He lunges at All Might, but Todoroki stops him with a block of ice. "Wait." "The fuck are you doing, half and half?" Kacchan snarls, whirling on him. As he does, other students finally reach the rooftop too. Sero swings himself and Kaminari up with his tape. Yaoyorozu makes a grappling hook for herself, and Uraraka makes herself and a few others float, while Asui swings them over with her tongue. They circle around All Might, who tightens his hold on Izuku. "Fighting villains is different when they have a hostage," he says. "Everything you do will have a direct effect on the hostage. Attack carelessly, and I could use young Midoriya as a human shield." He gives a pointed look to Kacchan, who seethes. "Your job is to save him without getting him hurt. How will you do that?" "Well, I think the answer should be obvious." With that said, he takes off into the air again, this time landing on the ground. The next half hour goes by very slowly. Every time the students circle around All Might, he moves again. Just catching up to him eats up a lot of time, and when they do, they struggle to figure out how to take him on without hurting Izuku. It's difficult and frustrating for his classmates, but Izuku just finds himself getting kind of bored. "You know," Izuku says when they're alone, "if Shinzo-kun was here, this fight would be over in 2 seconds. "Is that the boy you're training with now?" All Might asks, flicking another stream of air at Kachan when the blonde rounds the corner. "Aizawa-san's apprentice?" "Yeah, you'd love him," Izuku says. "He's like Aizawa-sensei, but sassier." "Oh, Lord." All Might jumps out of the way when the ground beneath him freezes. "You'll have to try harder than that, you zygotes. Mwahaha." His chest vibrates with a booming laugh. He's really having way too much fun with this. Izuku, in a very deadpanned voice, says, "Ah." "We're coming, Midoriya-kun," Hagakure's voice cries out from somewhere. "Hang in there, buddy. We'll save you." "Cool." Izuku sniffs, flashing a thumbs up to no one in particular. The clock ticks by as All Might continues to get chased around. Then, all of a sudden, everyone seems to disappear. All Might glances around at the empty street, standing just outside of some sort of parking garage. "Oh, heroes, where are you?" he calls out. "Don't tell me you left young Midoriya to fend for himself." Izuku is kind of tempted to bite him. Something hits the ground behind them, and All Might whirls around just as the object explodes, a cloud of smoke bursting out. "A smoke screen?" All Might questions, jumping backwards to avoid it. However, that means that now they're inside the parking garage, shrouded in the dim light. Just as Izuku realizes what's about to happen, he hears dark shadows roar. Another smoke bomb goes off, this one unavoidable in the tight quarters. Izuku can't see anything anymore, but he can hear multiple battle cries from his classmates, as well as the sound of Todoroki's ice freezing over something. A mass of darkness swirls around them, and All Might's arms suddenly loosen their grip slightly. As soon as they do, Izuku feels a long, slimy tongue wrap around his torso and yank him away. He isn't quite sure what happens then. He feels a lot of hands moving him around, and the next thing he knows, he's out in the blinding sunlight once more. It takes him a moment to realize that Ida is carrying him away from the parking garage, where sounds of fighting erupt. "Midoriya-kun!" Ida looks down at him worriedly. "Are you all right?" Izuku blinks up at him, noticing that he's being carried bridal style. Yeah. A bit confused, but..." "Not so fast, young Ida." All Might is suddenly running beside them. Before Ida can even react, All Might knocks him aside and grabs Izuku once more. The rest of his classmates are desperately dashing over from the garage. "Not a bad plan," All Might says as they circle around him. Izuku is really getting quite tired of being carried like this. All Might's arms are wrapped around his torso, leaving his legs dangling awkwardly. Wait a minute. "I'm glad you realize that teamwork is the key to dealing with hostage situations," All Might says. "Unfortunately, your realization has come a bit too late. Your time is almost up. So..." Izuku kicks him in the balls. "Ah!" All Might's grip slackens, and Izuku proceeds to sink his teeth into his arm and clamp down until the man drops him. Then he makes a mad dash while his classmates surge past him. Now having free rein to attack All Might all at once, he almost pities the man when he hears the utterly furious screech that Kachan lets out, followed by a booming explosion. "Midoriya!" Something bumps into him, and then he's been swept off his feet again. The wind whips past them as Todoroki swiftly glides across the ground, on his ice, carrying Izuku bridal style. And as thrilled as Izuku is to be in his arms rather than All Might's, he's kind of done with being passed around. Are you all right? Todoroki asks. Why would he not be? It's not like All Might was actually going to hurt him. Yeah, I'm fine, he says. Thanks. There's a particularly loud yell behind them, and Todoroki glances over his shoulder. Incoming! Someone shouts. Todoroki skids to a halt briefly and stomps his foot on the ground, creating a massive glacier like the one from the sports festival. All Might must have been chasing them, but the sounds of fighting continue on a moment later, now muffled by the ice. Todoroki whirls around and continues sliding, only to suddenly take a sharp left and swerve into a building. Izuku isn't quite sure where he's taking him. Todoroki kicks open a door and finally puts Izuku down, shoving him forward into the dark room before following him and, wow, that's a tight fit. He shuts the door and makes a wall of ice as an additional barrier, leaving them with even less space. Izuku wiggles uncomfortably, stuck between Todoroki's chest and something else. Todoroki-kun? There's a click, and a light above them turns on, dim and occasionally flickering. Izuku blinks and struggles to glance around. A closet. He won't expect us to hide in here, Todoroki explains, panting heavily from his ordeal. He thinks we're still running. We can hide here until the time runs out. It shouldn't be long. Oh, Izuku hopes it won't be long. It's dusty and cramped in here. Silence falls between them, and Izuku tries to figure out what to say. Funny how this is the lesson we're learning, right? I mean, 'cause, crap. Why'd he say that? Izuku can't really see Todoroki's face from where he's pressed against him, but he can feel him shift. It's like we're back in that alley, he says slowly. Izuku tries to reassure him. You know All Might wouldn't have hurt me. I know, it's just... Todoroki sighs, and Izuku can feel his breath disturb the curls on the top of his head. I couldn't do anything. Alone, Izuku points out. Even working together, we couldn't really do anything. Todoroki pauses, then huffs a bit more lightly. I can't believe you kicked him in the balls. Izuku smiles against his costume. It'll become one of my most treasured memories. A little snort of laughter escapes Todoroki. Shocked, Izuku pulls back enough to look at his face. Even Todoroki seems mildly surprised. Izuku's smile grows. I don't think I've ever heard you laugh before, Todoroki-kun. He lets out a giggle of his own. I like it. Todoroki stares down at him. For some reason, his face is starting to look a bit flushed. Thanks to their small hiding spot, their faces are very close together. Izuku's neck is starting to cramp from looking up at Todoroki, so he moves to rest his chin on the boy's shoulder. Much like during their first sparring lesson, and later during their internship week, Izuku's heart starts beating rapidly in response to Todoroki's close proximity. Thankfully, he doesn't feel as dizzy or breathless as he did during those times. He kind of likes it, actually. It's like his insides are all fuzzy and warm, kind of like how he feels on the rare occasions he gets to snuggle with Kacchan, except there's something else to it. Todoroki's heart is beating rapidly against his chest, too. Izuku sniffs, noticing an odd burning smell slowly growing stronger. The fabric under his chin is starting to grow warm, too. His eyes fly open. Todoroki-kun! He yelps, jumping backwards, only to grunt when he bumps into a shelf. You're burning! Izuku can't really get away from the other boy, but Todoroki is quick to put out his flames. In fact, the room drops about 10 degrees colder. Sorry, Todoroki hastily apologizes. I didn't mean to. Izuku shivers and winces as something hard pokes his back painfully. Ow, wait, hold on. He grabs Todoroki's arm and steps between his feet, trying to get into a more comfortable position. The thing poking his back doesn't move, and he shifts again, accidentally knocking something over. It clatters to the ground, and he almost slips, but the other boy catches him. "Stop." Todoroki grunts. There's... Something jabs the back of his thigh, and he presses closer to Todoroki, trying to wiggle away from the offending object. The fabric of their costume slides together unpleasantly as Izuku keeps shifting. Suddenly, Todoroki lets out a strangled noise in his throat. Hands grab Izuku's hips, and he abruptly finds himself being pressed against the shelf behind him. He groans and twists uncomfortably, but Todoroki's guttural voice makes him freeze. "Stop squirming." Izuku goes still. Above him, Todoroki breathes heavily, skin flushed as he fixes him with an intense gaze. Izuku swallows. It's been a while since those mismatched eyes have made him so nervous. For a few moments, neither of them speak. Izuku is still very uncomfortable, the shelf digging into his back painfully, but he can't budge an inch with Todoroki pressed against him like this. The grip on his hips tightens when he tries to move, a silent warning to stay still. Izuku's heart feels like it's going to beat out of his chest, and he feels so breathless that he doesn't trust himself to speak. Instead, he averts his gaze and looks down at Todoroki's chest. Then his eyes drop even lower. Their hips are pressed against each other, Todoroki's thigh between his legs. With the way they're squashed together like this, Izuku suddenly realizes why Todoroki was so bothered by his wiggling. His face burns. He looks back up at Todoroki, ready to spout a million apologies, but he finds himself trapped by heterochromatic eyes. Todoroki stares at him silently, intensely, and Izuku feels strangely vulnerable under his magnetic gaze. He gulps, and he comes to his second realization of the day. The way his heart pounds around Todoroki, how his cheeks flush, how dizzy he gets. Izuku's breath catches in his throat. Oh shit. The buzzer goes off, signaling the end of the training exercise. As if snapped from the trance, Todoroki jerks backwards, hitting the wall of ice. It evaporates a second later, and he practically falls out of the door. "Todoroki-kun!" Izuku yelps, but the other boy catches himself before he can hit the ground. "There you are!" Kirishima spots them through the window and trots into the building, Kachan on his heels. "Did you hide? Good thinking, Todoroki-kun." Todoroki's face is still flushed. "Mm-hmm," is all he can get out. Kirishima tilts his head, concerned. "Are you all right, man? You don't look so good," he says, but Todoroki is already stumbling out of the building. "Hey, wait!" Kachan turns to Izuku. "What the fuck happened?" Izuku shakes his head feverishly. He's still reeling from his realization, but he manages to squeak. "Nothing." Kachan's eyes narrow. He glances at Kirishima walking away with a decidedly unsteady Todoroki, then glances back at Izuku's flushed face. His eyes widen slightly. "No way," he says after a beat. Izuku moans and covers his face with his hands. Kachan is silent for a moment. Then he snorts. "Oh, shut up!" Izuku cries, punching his friend on the shoulder as he bursts out laughing. "It's not funny." "You should see your face. You're the worst." The next few days are kind of awkward between him and Todoroki. They still sit with each other at lunch, of course, and it's not like they're actively avoiding each other. It's just a little weird. Tense, perhaps. But as Izuku snuggles with Sushi in his bed later one night, trying to calm his racing heart as he thinks about Todoroki, he comes to think, what does it matter? Yes, he can admit that he thinks Todoroki is pretty. But a lot of people think that. Ashido said that basically all the girls think he's the most handsome boy in class.
Izuku is perfectly fine acknowledging his friend's attractiveness, and as for all the physical reactions he has to the boy, well, he figures that could just be attributed to hormones. He knows the human body better than any of his classmates, so he knows that he's not excluded from the variety of raging hormones that go on in a 15-year-old's body. It makes sense, he supposes. He likes Todoroki. They're good friends, and maybe that, coupled with his newfound appreciation for Todoroki's beauty, has given his body and mind all sorts of weird signals. It's a perfectly logical explanation. He doesn't have to worry. Nothing has to change, and nothing has to be done about it. So, despite the fact that he now blushes whenever Todoroki looks at him a certain way, and that Kacchan, and Kirishima, because Kacchan told him, the traitor, has a shit-eating grin whenever he's in the same room as the bicolored boy, life continues on as normal. Or, as normal as life in UA can be. On more than one occasion, Izuku spots All Might talking to Mirio. He wonders how things are going on that end, and if All Might has decided to make Mirio his successor. He doesn't want to be nosy, though, and he figures All Might would probably come to him about any big developments anyway, so he lets it go. In regards to training, he's having varying amounts of success. Aizawa has just started teaching him and Shinzo how to use a capture weapon. Neither of them are very good at it, but Izuku tries not to get frustrated, considering that they just started learning. He also finds that it's easier to fail when you have someone else to fail with you. His quirk, on the other hand, is showing more improvement. He's able to slow the flow of energy by 50% now. His progress excites him, but he doesn't forget about one of the things Kame taught him that he's wanted to try. Currently, it's 4 p.m. in the afternoon, 2 weeks before finals, and Izuku is tending to Monoma's wounds. The boy has a nasty cut on his leg that normally wouldn't be too difficult to heal, except there's also an annoying amount of gravel stuck in it that Izuku has to pick out first. Meanwhile, Monoma is complaining very loudly at how unfairly Vlad King treated him during whatever exercise Class 1B was doing. "He just doesn't see my potential as a leader," Monoma sniffs disdainfully. "Instead, he chose that hothead Kamakiri-kun, and his crazy tactics got us trampled by the beast." "Beast?" Izuku questions idly, removing a piece of gravel with some tweezers. Monoma waves his hand dismissively. "Shishida-kun has a quirk that turns him into a big hairy beast. He's strong, but he goes a little wild sometimes." "That must have been scary," Izuku says, a bit condescendingly, but it gets the reaction he's looking for. Monoma blinks at him, looking mildly surprised, before he tilts his chin away with a smirk. "Nah, he's all right. I've dealt with scarier things than him." It's clearly bait, but Izuku takes it. "Like what?" Monoma's eyes flash eagerly, and he launches into a very dramatic tale of the time he protected his younger brother from not one but 2 villains. It's clearly exaggerated and unrealistic, and about halfway through Izuku realizes that the villains were most likely just some neighborhood bullies. However, Izuku still acts like he's fascinated with the story, nodding along excitedly and gasping at all the right times. Monoma preens under the attention, but more importantly, he doesn't give Izuku any trouble as he picks the gravel out of his wound. "And, well, that's just the kind of guy I am," Monoma finishes, feigning nonchalance. "That's really cool, Monoma-kun." Izuku looks up briefly to smile warmly at him. Monoma's chest puffs up just a little more. "Man, Class 1A must not be as impressive as they think they are," he snorts. "If you're impressed by a side character like me." What starts out as a typical arrogant statement abruptly turns into something surprisingly self-deprecating. Taken aback, Izuku asks, "Huh? What do you mean by side character?" "Ah, you know," Monoma says, turning up his nose. "Those people with flashy quirks like your friends outshine the rest of us. I'm not ignorant. I know my quirk can't even begin to compare with theirs when it comes to who's going to steal the spotlight. Your class is full of main characters. Surely you must see that." Izuku blinks, dumbfounded. What? Monoma looks at him like he's questioning his intelligence. Your class is full of main characters, he explains slowly. They get to be born with perfect quirks that basically guarantee their success so long as they have half a brain, and because their quirks are so perfect and flashy, everyone pays attention to them. But not everyone gets to have a flashy quirk. Take your homeroom teacher, for example. Sure, people like us can still become heroes, but in a society like this, we're always destined to be side characters. Izuku is honestly shocked. Monoma is always so narcissistic and arrogant. He never thought the boy would think so little of himself. His voice has a bitter edge to it, but ultimately he looks rather resigned, like he's already accepted this a long time ago. It makes something pull uncomfortably in Izuku's chest. Looking back down at Monoma's injury, Izuku silently keeps on working. Monoma is quiet too. The pull in Izuku's chest grows stronger. He doesn't pause in his ministrations or take his eyes off the wound as he hesitantly says, "You know, I wanted to be a hero." He can feel Monoma's eyes snap to him, but he continues softly. "And I think a part of me always will. Even though I have this amazing healing quirk, it's hard not being able to do what you want because of what you were born with. But even though this isn't the quirk I wanted, I still love it very much." He glances at Monoma briefly. "Even though your quirk isn't as flashy as you would like, even if it might not get you into the spotlight, you should always respect the gift you were born with. You can do things that other people can't. You can save people in ways that other people can't. So I guess..." He removes the last piece of gravel and straightens up. Monoma gazes at him with an indecipherable expression, and Izuku gives him a weary smile. "We just have to do the best we can with what we're given." After a moment, he adds, "And for what it's worth, I think you could be a main character. You might have to work a bit harder than everyone else, but you shouldn't give up and settle for being a side character." Monoma stares at him. Then his lips quirk up into a smirk. "Who said I was giving up?" he says, arching a brow. Izuku smiles and ducks his head, moving his hand over the boy's leg to heal him. "There you go. All better. Tell Shishida-kun to be more careful next time." "Sure," Monoma drawls, sliding off the bed. After testing his weight on his newly healed leg, he walks over to the door. He pauses, then glances at Izuku over his shoulder. A smirk still plays on his lips. "Thanks." Izuku watches him leave, chest feeling warm. Maybe Monoma's not so bad after all. The next couple of days go by rather uneventfully. Izuku finds himself becoming a bit stressed as finals approach. Between school, training with Recovery Girl, training with Aizawa, regular homework, and Recovery Girl's homework, he hardly has any time for himself. It doesn't help that he doesn't know what to study for Recovery Girl's exam. Needless to say, his anxiety is having a blast. When he walks into the infirmary for his after-school lesson, he's surprised to see Mirio there with All Might, who's in his normal form. Both blondes give him blinding grins when they see him. Izuku squints. "Hello, young Midoriya." "Kohai." Izuku smiles and walks in, ducking All Might's hand when he reaches out to ruffle his curls. He doesn't manage to avoid the arm Mirio plops around his shoulders, but at least he leaves his hair alone. "How's your day been, Midoriya-kun?" Mirio beams at him. Flushing slightly, Izuku averts his gaze and says, It's been fine, I guess. What are you doing here?" "I broke my toe," Mirio says with a flourish, lifting his foot to display said broken toe. Izuku stifles a sigh. "Your quirk makes you untouchable. How on earth do you keep breaking things?" "I've been wondering that for the past 3 years. Recovery Girl doesn't even bother to look up from her computer. I've already said it, though, so all you need to do is heal it." Izuku looks up at All Might. And you? The man shakes his head, blonde tufts swaying. Oh, I'm fine. I just escorted young Togata here. I'll get out of your way. To Mirio, he says, meet me at the gate once you're done. Before he leaves, he manages to get his hand on Izuku's head before the greenette can duck, ruffling his hair and then leaving, while Izuku whines in protest. What is it with people messing up my hair all the time? He gripes, fixing his long curls. It's very ruffleable, Mirio says decisively. I ought to cut it short, Izuku grumbles under his breath. It will still be very ruffleable. Izuku sighs and Mirio snickers. Bending down, he takes Mirio's foot in his hand and casually asks, So, how are things between you and All Might going then? Huh? Mirio blinks at him, stunned. He glances up at the door where All Might left, then back at Izuku. The freckled boy simply arches a brow, and his eyes widen comically. You know? Of course I know. Who do you think healed him? Izuku finds the expression on Mirio's face very amusing right now. Recovery Girl knows too. Oh, good. Mirio lets out a huge sigh of relief. I'm glad there's at least some other people I can talk to about One for All. Izuku blinks. I mean, I still can't believe All Might offered it to me, and Sir Night-Eye has been getting me ready for this without even me knowing. How crazy is that? I mean, of course I'm grateful for it now, considering what he told me about One for All, but... Wait. Izuku interrupts, frowning in confusion. I'm totally lost. What the heck is One for All? Mirio freezes, looking like a deer caught in headlights. Recovery Girl sighs very loudly from her desk. Never underestimate the stupidity of heroes, she mutters under her breath as she gets up and moves over to the door, poking her head into the hallway. Toshinori-kun, she calls out. Come back here. Izuku glances between her and Mirio, who blanches, his expression morphing into one of utter dismay. As soon as All Might steps through the door, he blurts, I'm so sorry, I thought he knew. Knew about what? Izuku asks, turning to All Might. What's One for All, and why are you giving it to Mirio-senpai? All Might stares at him. Then he lets out a world-weary sigh, and reaches behind him to lock the door. Izuku frowns. Don't worry, All Might says to a very guilty-looking Mirio. I was going to tell him eventually. Tell me what? Izuku presses, frustration rising in his chest. What's going on here? Mirio looks like he just accidentally ran over someone's dog. All Might looks like he's resigned himself to some unknown fate, and Recovery Girl looks like she's just done with all of their bullshit, which, well, that's not an unusual look for her. But they all clearly know something that he doesn't, so, of course, he can't help being curious about what it is. And he won't admit this out loud, but a small, teeny-tiny part of him is just a little bit offended that he was left out of this secret. All Might and Mirio share a look that Izuku doesn't understand, and then the number one hero turns to him, wordlessly gesturing to his desk chair. The greenette reluctantly goes over and sits down, All Might doing the same on a spare stool a couple feet away from him. Mirio takes a step back to give them some space, but stays standing, and Izuku pretends not to notice the way he's watching his mentor with thinly veiled anxiousness in his eyes. Looking at All Might, Izuku doesn't ask again, but gazes at him imploringly. The man presses his lips together for a moment, then says, To answer your question, what is One for All? It is my quirk. That's what it's called. Izuku blinks in surprise. All Might's quirk. That's not what he was expecting. Such a strange name for a quirk like his. Why One for All? All Might's immensely powerful quirk is something that has been speculated on for many years, but... Wait a minute. Mirio said that All Might offered One for All to him. Izuku's brows furrow, but before he can open his mouth to ask anything, All Might continues. One for All is a very special quirk. The true nature of it being a very tightly kept secret, known to only a few select people. The tabloids called it superhuman strength and a boost, and I always dodged the question during interviews with a funny joke, because the symbol of peace, All Might, had to be a natural-born hero. And the way he says that, the expression on his face, makes Izuku's heart skip a beat. What is he saying? Is he not a natural-born hero? That's impossible. He's All Might. But the steadfast look in All Might's eyes chases away any thoughts that he might be lying, and the confirmation comes a moment later. But young Midoriya, that is not the case, he says in a severe but not bitter tone. Then he straightens up slightly and spreads his arms, declaring, "My quirk was passed on to me like a sacred torch. It is the ability to transfer power from one individual to another. One person cultivates the power and passes it on to another person, who also cultivates it and passes it on. That is the power of One for All. It is the crystallization of power that spins together the voices of those who need help with a courageous heart." He finishes his short speech with a triumphant lilt in his voice. Izuku stares at him blankly, his mind reeling. From her desk, Recovery Girl sniffs. All Might lowers his arms slowly. "So," he coughs slightly. "Yes, well, that is One for All." "What?" Izuku finally manages to choke out, eyes wide. I don't... No more words follow, and his mouth is just left hanging open for a few moments before he closes it, frustration burning in his chest as his mind whirls with confusion. It sounds impossible. It has to be impossible. But then again, everything about All Might always seems to be impossible. All Might's large hand reaches to grasp his. "I was going to tell you eventually, I swear," he says earnestly. "I've been lucky to have Chiyo-san in my corner for all these years, and once I pass my quirk on to young Togeda, I would like you to be by his side." Izuku startles and glances rapidly between him and Mirio. "What? Wait. I'm sorry. This is all a bit much. I'm still a little confused," he says uncertainly. You're going to give him your One for All?" All Might nods. "Yes, I am. As you already know, Sir Night-Eye desperately wanted me to find a successor after I got injured, so that I could have someone to pass One for All down to and train them to become the next symbol of peace. And even after we broke up, he still went and took young Togeda under his wing, in the hopes that I would one day accept him as my successor." Izuku doesn't miss the way his eyes shine with gratitude when he talks about his old friend's dedication. Slowly processing the information, the freckled boy glances back over at Mirio. Their eyes meet, and the older boy's expression smooths out to give him one of his familiar, bright, easygoing smiles. Somehow, Izuku finds a tiny bit of his anxiety slipping away just at the sight. "And you really think he's your successor?" he asks, turning to look up at All Might. He doesn't mean any offense by it, of course, but if all of this really is real, then this is a super important decision. A smile forms on All Might's lips, and he nods again. "I do," he says, looking at Mirio. "He has all the qualities I could possibly ask for. He has exceptional strength and skill, and is never one to shy away from a challenge. He has heart, and firmly stands by his values. He believes in what I also believe, that a hero is supposed to help and protect, to save the day with a smile, no matter what." All Might turns back to Izuku, eyes warm. "He is my successor." And he sounds certain of it. Even though part of Izuku is still reeling from the revelation, he can't help smiling a little. He slowly looks back at Mirio, gaze roaming over his impressive physique, his blonde hair, his bright eyes. They really are so similar, in more ways than one. And Izuku knows that there's truth to All Might's words. Of course there is. Mirio could never have caught Sir Night-Eye's attention or won the third-year sports festival if he didn't have an immense amount of skill and determination. But far more importantly than that, Izuku knows from experience how kind and caring he can be, going out of his way to make sure his kohai feels comfortable and making him laugh with silly jokes that don't always make sense but are somehow funny anyways. Yeah, he'd be a perfect successor for All Might. So, he says slowly, you don't have One for All yet. No, Mirio shakes his head. We were going to wait until summer break, so in case something goes wrong, I won't be in school. Goes wrong? Izuku questions, concerned. One for All can be a bit tricky to get the hang of at first, All Might admits a bit sheepishly. That's why Sir Night-Eye has been helping young Togeda get into peak physical shape, so that when he does accept my quirk, his body will be able to handle it. Mirio grins and flexes his muscles with a wink. Normally, Izuku might smile or blush, but his mind is still struggling to process all this new information. This is a lot. It kind of feels like the rug has been pulled out from under him, but admittedly, he's almost started to get used to that feeling now that he's at UA. He can handle this. It would have been nice if All Might had told him sooner, but he supposes he understands why he kept it a secret. But then All Might glances between him and Mirio and sighs once more. There's something else I need to tell you about, he says hesitantly. Something I haven't told you about yet, young Togeda, but you deserve to know. It almost sounds like he's trying to tell himself that. If you're going to accept One for All, I need you to know everything beforehand. Izuku's stomach sinks. There's more? Mirio looks confused too, his usual cheerful expression vanishing at All Might's severe tone. What do you mean? He asks. The origins of One for All, All Might replies, and then he goes on to tell them about a quirk that existed long ago, back when superpowers were just appearing, called All for One. He tells them of the man that used said quirk to steal the quirks of others and quickly gain immense power in the underworld of Japan during the chaotic period when society didn't know how to deal with the emergence of quirks. He tells them how he would force quirks onto people to make them submit to him, but that many could not bear the burden and would become like living dolls who could not speak, just like the Nomu. Izuku stiffens, memories of the hulking beast at USJ flashing across his mind. Its massive size, its immense strength, its shock absorption, its regenerating limbs. What? His quirk wasn't shock absorption. I didn't say that was all he had. Shigaraki's voice titters in his mind. This is his super regeneration. Nomu has been modified to take you at 100%. Beside him, Mirio's brows knit in confusion. What are you saying? All Might's expression is grim, but he continues on nonetheless, telling them about One for All's younger brother, the sickly man with a sense of justice that resisted him despite his quirklessness. He tells them how, for some unknown reason, whether it had been out of kindness or to force him into submission, All for One forced a quirk that could stock power onto his younger brother, who turned out to be not quirkless but in fact had the useless quirk that could pass on quirks, and those two mixed together created One for All. It's ironic, All Might says in a tone that sounds far too bitter for Izuku's liking, that justice always comes from evil. Wait, All Might, I understand how that came about, Mirio hastens to reassure him. But if you were worried I would reject One for All because it was created by a villain, don't be. After all, it's not about who it was made by, but how I use it that matters. He clenches his fist with a determined look in his eyes. Izuku smiles, but when he glances back at All Might, the man doesn't look any more relieved. If anything, he looks even grimmer than before. That's not it, he says, pressing his lips together. All for One continued to live on past the age of any normal man. With a power like his, he could steal any quirk he wanted. A quirk to stop aging is my best guess. And so, with the symbol of evil being pretty much immortal, the younger brother decided to entrust his quirk to future generations in hopes that if they slowly cultivated the power, it would one day be strong enough to stop his older brother. And when it was my turn, I was finally able to defeat him. Izuku's eyes widen. His turn. All Might fought this villain from nightmares and won? How? When? Surely a fight like that would have been all over the news. Wait a minute. I asked that this fight not be made public to the world. Izuku's breath hitches as realization dawns on him, and even though All Might's words are triumphant, the grimace on his face is all the confirmation Izuku needs. At least, that's what I thought. All Might reluctantly says. But now, I am unsure. There's a heavy silence in which Mirio and Izuku simply stare at him as he gazes down at his steepled fingers with a furrowed brow. Then, he speaks again. One for All has the power inherited to defeat All for One, so to say. When I saw the Nomu with multiple quirks, I had a bad feeling. He grimaces. I know this villain. He moves in calculating ways, and there have been a few signs that have led me to believe that he has started moving again, as the brain behind the League of Villains. Izuku's breath hitches as All Might sighs. I might still be wrong, and I might have truly defeated him, but young Togata, he looks up at the boy with solemn eyes. I need you to know that if you inherit One for All, then you might inherit this fight, too. Mirio stares at him, then gazes down at his hands silently, his brow furrowed. All Might dips his head. I completely understand if you... I'll do it, Mirio says, surprising the man. He clenches his fists and narrows his eyes in determination. Of course I'll do it. All Might blinks, stunned. I don't want you to make this decision hastily. I'm not, Mirio says. It's not a hasty decision. I'm going to become a pro-hero soon. Even without One for All, I'd be doing my best to fight this guy. He gazes at All Might earnestly, not a hint of doubt in his eyes. The older man stares at him for a moment before his lip twitches up. Young Togata. Izuku jumps to his feet, waving his hands frantically. Wait a minute, he squeaks. All Might, you don't have to give it to him right now. I'm going to heal you as soon as I can. You'll be strong again, strong enough to defeat this All for One. There's no rush. Young Midoriya, calm down. Relax. All Might soothes, gently grabbing his hands. You misunderstand. I won't completely lose One for All once I give it to young Togata. Izuku blinks. Oh. He sits back down, a little embarrassed but still incredibly worried. He glances between his senpai and All Might anxiously. But I don't like this. I don't want Mirio-senpai facing off against this guy. I'm more worried about you, Mirio says, looking down at him. Izuku blinks in surprise. If he really did survive, then that's probably why Shigaraki has his eye on you. He's probably injured and needs a healer. Someone strong enough to heal him. He turns to All Might, eyes full of concern. Aren't you worried? Izuku opens his mouth to reply, but All Might startles him by saying, Yes, after young Midoriya told me about Shigaraki's interest, I expressed my concerns to the principal. A couple of underground heroes patrol your area regularly, so he asked them to keep an eye on you on your way home. He says the last part to Izuku. The Greenette doesn't think this day can get any weirder. What? He exclaims, mind whirling. That's good, Mirio says, relaxing slightly, and acting as if he can't hear Izuku's brain running a mile a minute. So what now? Now you think about this, All Might says, standing up. He gives Mirio a firm look. I know you're young and eager to fight, but please give this some more thought before you make your decision. Pressing his lips together, Mirio nods. And you? All Might turns to Izuku and places a hand on his head. For once, Izuku doesn't push it off. Focus on your studies, and focus on your quirk. We can discuss One for All more later, but I don't want you to concern yourself with what villains might be thinking or doing. Like I said, I might be wrong and All for One might not be out there. But there's nothing to be done about it right now, okay? Izuku's mind feels scrambled from this sudden onslaught of information. He nods numbly. Okay. All Might gives his head a small pat, nods politely at Recovery Girl, and leaves. Silence fills the room. Slowly, he turns to look at Mirio. His senpai looks back at him, bright blue eyes roaming over his face with a tinge of concern. Then, he smiles softly. Izuku doesn't resist as he reaches out and gently pulls him to his chest, tucking his head under his chin and rubbing his back soothingly. Izuku slowly lets out a long exhale and nuzzles closer. My brain hurts, he mumbles against his senpai's shirt. Mirio chuckles softly. All right, listeners, this concludes the second half to Chapter 21 of the Roundabout Way of Fate. Chapter 22 will be up next. Drop your thoughts, comments, reactions below for me to this lengthy chapter. I would love to hear what you're all thinking. Just a reminder that the fic, of course, is located over on AO3, so you can always slide over leaving comments, kudos, and support to the original author as well. I'm sure it's much appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.